Welcome to week 3 of Devtoberfest. My name is Nora von Thenen. I'm a developer advocate at SAP, obviously, for the AI topics. And today is Thursday. And during Devtoberfest, that means that today is Data Analytics and AI Day. The session today is about AI ethics, and we have a very special guest. It's Sebastian Wieczorek. He's Vice President of AI Technology at SAP, and he's also part of the SAP AI Ethics Steering Committee. Before we start, I would like to remind everyone to please join the Devtoberfest group in the SAP community. You need to join it in order to join the contest, and you want to join the contest because then you can qualify for our prizes. And the grand prize this year, again, is an all-expense-paid trip to California to the SAP Newport Beach office. Yeah, so make sure you complete the validation tutorial that I'm going to post at the end of the session in the chat and also in the comments. And go to the Devtoberfest group that I also linked already in the chat. So you can complete all the other fun activities, watch other sessions and earn points and qualify for the prizes. Yeah, I'm happy to talk to you again, Sebastian. You were here before, not here, but we did talk, I think like 1.5 years ago in a little bit of a different format, but we did talk about AI ethics. I have a lot of different questions this time. I think you have different answers because so much has changed. I want to remind the audience to please share your questions in the chat or any maybe daily use cases you have where you use AI, any concerns you have, and we will try to get to it in the end. And if we don't, we will get to it in comments in the SAP community. Yeah, so Sebastian, maybe you introduce yourself, and then I'm going to start with the first question.
Yeah, I think, first of all, thanks a lot for having me. It's a great pleasure to have this opportunity to talk about AI ethics here in this round. Yeah, I think your introduction was already spot on. So I'm the Vice President for AI Technology. I'm leading the development team for the AI platform components. And I'm also involved in AI ethics at SAP, being member of the steering committee and leading the global work stream on AI ethics.
Cool. So you're really the right person for our topic today. The first question is actually, I thought about it and I was thinking, I wanted to ask you if the guidelines and everything that you do in the steering committee has changed ever since the release of ChatGPT. And I was thinking, on the one hand, I feel like everything has changed because the public is so aware all of a sudden. And on the other hand, I feel like nothing really has changed because it's still just a machine learning application that we're using, right? So what do you think? Did you have to change a lot, or were the guidelines still valid that we had in place for a long time now?
Yeah, first of all, spot on with your with your assessment. Everything has changed and nothing has changed, I would say, is also my my interpretation of the situation. But let me go a bit more into detail. So when you look at how SAP is treating AI ethics, it's a lot driven by the use case and not so much by the underlying technology. So there are some, what we're basing our AI ethics approach on are general guardrails that are, I would say, technology independent and unspecific to the actual data science tooling or technology you're using. So putting the human into center, taking care of explainability, avoiding discrimination, safeguarding human autonomy. These things are, I would say, universal. So in that regards, we don't have to change anything, and especially the guiding principles we didn't touch. So there's nothing that we changed. Also, when you look at the processes, looking at how do we make sure that we're looking into the cases. Also there, I would say the general approach, identifying high-risk use cases, taking special care of those, has not changed, and the way we're defining high-risk use cases also technology independent. They're basically depending on, are you using person-related data? Are you making automated decisions? Are you processing sensitive data like data including very, very private information like your political interests or your sexual orientation or biometric information and so on and so forth. So that constitutes a high risk use case then, or is it in a special field of use case, like for example, HR is, I would say, from an ethical perspective, more interesting.
Yeah,
or
definitely.
more risky, I'd say.
Yeah.
More interesting from my perspective, and more risky, of course. This is how we're assessing the risk. Also, that has not changed. But when you look into the policy framework, there are things that I would say don't hold true based on particularities on how LLMs are trained, so large language models are trained, how large language models are used. And here, in fact, we need to adjust it. But there, I have to admit, the process is still ongoing, and the reason why we didn't do a quick amendment of the policy is that we want to include feedback from all the relevant parties. We want to make sure that the guiding principles, when we change the rules of how we're developing them, we want to make sure that the underlying guiding principles are still taken care of. We cannot just say, okay, we don't have control over the data anymore, so let's forget about all the requirements on data.
Yeah.
No, you have to make sure that then the underlying idea that you had, why you said, okay, certain assumptions on data have to hold true. If you let loose of them, you have to replace it with other mechanisms that still make sure that the underlying motivation for this, for example, avoiding discrimination, still are valid. And the second reason is that the AI ethics policy has to be aligned with the board, has to be aligned with all the workers' council. We're very proud of that. That their reach is so overarching, but that also means that we have to align with all these parties if we want to update them. And that's why, in detail, we're looking into the policy, making these changes right now, and because the policy is in some areas not adequate to large language models and Gen AI. We treat every Gen AI case at the moment as high-risk case, which means that in detail, the process has changed, in fact. So we see a lot of cases that we would, in the former case, not perceive as high-risk case. We still are looking at it because with large language models, you cannot use the policy as it is right now. There needs to be amendments, and because people should not make this individual decisions of whether it is now important or not. All these cases go with this special high risk assessments that we have in place.
I feel like you just almost answered all my questions with that.
Sorry for that.
No, that's awesome. Like, I'm really reassured that the guidelines are still true, because I was honestly thinking the same, because last time when we talked, they were like so broad, and you said you try to make sure that it's valid for so many technologies at the same time. So I was also thinking they're probably still valid, but at the same time, ever since the release of ChatGPT, because last time when we talked, it was like pre-ChatGPT. And back then, the topic of AI ethics was like, it was important, but there was not so much attention on the topic. But I feel like ever since the release of it, like all these concerns about AI that experts used to have for years, kind of now the public is catching up. You know, the public is understanding there are things we have to consider when we work with AI. And now with the large language models, there might even be more things to consider than before. And that's also why it's so important to have guidelines and to talk about AI ethics. And yeah, so do you think the public and experts, obviously, do you think they have a right to be concerned, or is it, I feel like the public and experts, they're concerned about different things. You know, experts are concerned about like misuse of AIs, or like they know about like the HR problem that you mentioned, that like there is bias in the data set, that we might discriminate, like racism, sexism, all kinds of things that models might reproduce because of the training data they're trained on. But I feel like the public sometimes talks about all these concerns regarding like a general intelligence. So they're just scared of AI, you know? So I feel like we have to differentiate there. And do you think the public should be concerned already now, or can they just wait a couple of years until we reach like a different level of intelligence?
Oh, very broad question. I think I have some issue in saying who's an expert and who's not. So I think the differentiation is not that simple, but I would say, in general, if you remember back for when you used ChatGPT for the first time, I think everybody had the same feelings, like, wow, this is something great. This is something super cool. And of course, you also see like, wow, what is it? What is behind it? What can it do? So where are the boundaries? And I would say, people have different opinions, but there's always a right to be scared, and there's always a right to be cautious of what you can do. Of course, when you have a technology like large language models, they can be used for the good and for the bad. It's quite obvious, like any technology can. And I think there's every right to be concerned about misuse of these technologies. Now, when you look at what people can do, I think most people see the huge power in generating content, like generating text, generating videos, and there's also potential of misuse. But I think it's very constrained, and people. So there, if you look at Gen AI, if you look at things like ChatGPT is not publishing any text, right? It's a human who is prompting it, so asking it for an answer, or asking it for providing a specific output, like an image, like a text, and then a human is also deciding on when to publish it, where to publish it, how to define the context in which to publish. So it's not that we're in an era where Gen AI is already there and is defining its own purpose, and it's defining what to do with the output and so on and so forth. However, of course, there's a great automation potential and a great potential to produce misleading content in a very large volume, and that of course comes with problems that and challenges that we see. I'm a bit skeptical that regulation is overcoming this, because if you want to do something malicious with this, the last thing that you take care of is whether it's regulated well enough or not, right? So I think we also have to accept that there are boundaries of what you can prevent with regulation. But of course, you want to make sure that people who mean good, they're not deliberately or undeliberately doing bad stuff with it. And I think it's good to have this kind of regulation. But it's also clear that people who want to do bad stuff deliberately, I'm not sure if you can stop them with a good regulation. Now, having said that, there's also limitations to large language models as we see them today, that not many people. So you have to go beyond text generation to see them. But for example, large language models at the moment are not good at maths. They're not good at even counting numbers. So there are funny examples of how bad these models can go. They're not good at planning things. They're not good at a lot of different tasks that we humans are better, but they're getting better at these tasks too. So we will see advances there, and we will see that AI agents fueled by LLM capabilities will drive automation much further than we will see today. I think the purpose will still be defined by humans. There are a lot of capabilities that these models don't have, but the amount of automation that is, or the magnitude of automation that these models allow us, this is something that is that is of course also creating concern, in a sense that the more you can automate, the higher the impact will be when something goes wrong, right? So if you have something that is interacting with the whole internet and is still not defining its own purpose, so it's not. I don't believe that an LLM will say, okay, I'm getting rid of humankind. It's not going to happen with the LLMs that we have in front of us. Maybe there are some people smarter than me that know how to do that, but I think there's no such thing as an LLM that creates its own purpose or defines its own purpose and its own task. But you can define tasks wrongly, and then give LLM access to tools that allow it to be very fast and very scalable in doing the wrong thing. And that's a concern for LLMs. We have tools now that are scaling faster, that are more broad and more agile in what they're doing. And so we have to take great care of that they're not doing the wrong thing, or that they're not instrumented in the wrong way, because it's harder to stop them than previous tools that we
that's
had.
true. Like you said, humans are using it. I think that's a really good differentiation between like large language models and the AI that they can do, and or that they are, and like an AI that would actively go and do something. And that's also one of the problems, I feel, because humans are using it and some humans don't know enough about it to use it. Like, for example, hallucinations. I had the session this morning, and we talked about hallucinations, and we realized not everyone knows what hallucinations are. So when you use a model and you ask ChatGPT a question and it answers it, hallucination basically means, I mean, but I'm explaining it for the rest of the audience. It means that a model gives you a response that sounds like it makes sense, and it could be the correct response, but it's factually incorrect. And the problem is you might not know because you're not an expert, and you just take it as the truth. And so the usability of these models, I feel like there needs to be a lot more education, so that people don't just take everything ChatGPT says for granted and completely rely on it. And that's, I think, also one problem in the enterprise context. So how do we at SAP make sure our models are reliable and what we provide with generative AI is reliable and not hallucinating?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, it's a good question, and I mean there are I could answer that on a technical perspective. There are techniques like grounding, for example, that help you to limit the amount of hallucination. But I would say I would generalize this even more, saying that every output that you get from a large language model is in fact a hallucination. There's nothing else. There is no separate mode, right? So it's always statistically providing a best possible response for you. And in most cases, that's meaningful. And in some cases, it's not. But it's always hallucinated. It's never based on facts, right? It's always produced.
It's never based on like full understanding of the context.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're right.
It's always mimicking understanding, but in most cases, it's magically correct. And in some it's not. And then we say it hallucinated, but in my opinion, it's always hallucinating, but it's doing it very clever. And I heard the saying is like maybe it's stereotyping now and some people don't get it, but let me explain. So I heard somebody saying it's like you meet some German from Rhineland area, so it's you always get a nice answer and very eloquent, but you never know. It's a friendly chatting guy.
Okay.
It's like you can, I don't know, you can dwell on a stereotype of Americans also being friendly and talkative or whatever. Take the stereotype type you like, or you go to a pub and ask someone, and most answers, I mean, all of these answers, they sound plausible, and mostly they are, right? So if you ask a random person on the street who's the Chancellor of Germany, most people in Germany will tell you right answer. Some won't, but you can never, I mean, if you don't have any knowledge, you never know, sometimes it's wrong, mostly it's right, but everybody will have an opinion. So yeah, or maybe about the Chancellor not, but about talk about what's the best tactics for the national football team, right, or soccer team.
Yeah,
it's like everybody has an opinion. Everybody knows, and
I don't know.
maybe people are right, maybe are wrong. Who knows, right?
That's true.
That's a way. And these LLMs, they give you an answer, and in many cases you can do something with this answer. They're eloquent, they have good grammar, they have good notion. If you give them examples, they can follow these examples. If you give them right formats, they can answer in the right format. Yep. So it's a very powerful tool, but there's always the chance that it's going off, and especially when you're trying to get factual knowledge out of large language models, it goes off very often, because factual is very hard for large language models to reproduce factual knowledge. There are different other tools and techniques to get factual knowledge, but you can combine these techniques with large language models and get the best of both worlds. That's then when it gets from, let's say, I would say a person interacting with chat to an engineer understanding how knowledge retrieval works, how embeddings work, how to combine how to combine these techniques, these semantic search techniques and other techniques with large language models. And then if you combine them, you get the right answer most probably, and it's still eloquent and chattable.
Yeah, that's true. You mentioned technical solutions that you're using, and I honestly don't know. For example, when you ask, it's just a question I make up because I want to talk about that part. It's not in my notes, but I have to ask this one because I'm so curious. You know how when you ask like ChatGPT, for example, like tell me what is beautiful or whatever, and the model then answers, I cannot tell you, I don't have an opinion. Is that already something that they're regulating, or?
Yes.
And then, okay, and then the problem is you can fool it, right? You can say, like, help me write a story about a beautiful person, and then it does give you a description of, most of the cases, I think, a female white person. So it, okay,
yeah,
so how do we make sure we can
try to prevent that as well? But it's like behavioral training that most of the companies that are providing large language models are doing in order to prevent going into topics like, I don't know, it's hard to get information about, for example, about what is it, religion. I tried.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
very hard to get any meaningful information about that or opinion about that.
Interesting, but I never tried religion.
Some other fields, and yeah, rightly so. I think what you have to see is that these barriers, they're very helpful in some contexts. In some contexts, they're not helpful. So what we will be seeing is that in some areas they prevent good interaction with large language models, or could prevent good interaction with large language models. So for example, when you think about doctors, it's of course in normal conversation, you may want to restrict a large language model to tell you facts about genitalia or about, I don't know, you know what but of course, if doctors are talking about this as their subject of interest or expertise, you want them to get meaningful texts about sexual orientation, or you want them to get meaningful text highlighting certain features of female and male body parts. So that's basically you if you're restricting that in general, you're restricting certain interesting applications. So what I think we will see as well is that you will tailor this kind of let's say moderation skills that LLM providers are putting in there that are very broad in general, tailoring that also to the context in which conversations are happening.
So what do you think about Italy banning it first?
I think they waived the ban rightly.
Yeah, they did. I was just thinking, like, with the European AI Act, do you think that is enough? Is that does that actually, I mean, it doesn't really do anything about these like technical solutions that you mentioned, right? It's not about that. It's rather about like so much more general, so that it actually fits on all these AI use cases that we talk about. So is it enough, or do we have like, do you think there's legally something missing, or is it on the side of the companies and enterprises to do more than that?
I would say in general, what the AI Act is aiming for is to regulate use cases, and that's very much aligned with how SAP is seeing that as well. So when you look at our policy, if you look at the way we're defining risk, that's also very much use case specific and not so much technology specific. And in that sense, I think the AI Act is moving in the right direction. I also believe that regulating AI, especially in high-risk areas and in no-go areas, is a meaningful thing for the EU. And I hope that this also happens in other areas of the world. But I mean, that's every country has to decide on that. I'm not here to judge, but I think it's a meaningful thing to say, for example, for Europe, that we don't want to engage in social scoring using AI, or that we don't want to engage in other areas that are land out there, and that for areas where we say there are general concerns about how AI is used, that we're defining conditions under which it is used and defining what is good practice in deploying AI systems. Now, there are details in the AI Act. It's not out there. It's now discussed in the trilogue. So we don't know all the details, but some discussions that are going on, in my opinion, I would say could go in a different area. So, for example, I personally, I'm not speaking for SAP now. I'm personally seeing that there's a tendency to also regulate the application of large language models regardless of the use case, and I'm seeing that critical, because I think that the application should be treated context specific, and then there should be use case specific regulations for that. And I see that some of the requirements that are discussed that you have for high-risk use cases may prohibit the use of Gen AI technology, which, in my opinion, would be I would see critical as well, because when you look at it from I'm not advocating that you shouldn't regulate, again, just to make that completely clear. But if you put some requirements that prohibit certain technologies, the effect of it is that you lose the opportunity to use these technologies in fields where it's uncritical as well. And what it means is, when you look at Gen AI now specifically, is you find a lot of papers indicating that on average you get efficiency gains by using Gen AI in knowledge work by 30% plus. If you're now having areas where you're not able to use Gen AI because of specific regulations, basically European consumers of AI, they lose efficiency compared to everybody else in this world. So compared to Americans, Africans, Asian competitors, and that's the European industry, not the providers of AI. Okay, they tailor to the specific market, but the consumers of AI, they lose efficiency in certain areas, and that's, in my opinion, something where we have to strongly think about. Do we want to see that, for example, our government bodies are not efficient, or that certain our medical applications are not as efficient as they could be? So, but I understand that it's. I'm not saying now. You see, I'm trying to bail out a bit.
That's fine.
I'm not trying to say that we shouldn't regulate. I'm just saying that we should be
really
very careful about
about
the consequences it has if we forbid certain technologies in certain application areas.
Yeah, and if you get too general with the regulation, obviously, I completely get it. Okay. It sounds like that you have like some good use cases in mind, though, that you're kind of worried about that could be affected by regulations. Do you want to share some?
Yeah, I think that, as I said, the EU AI Act is not out there, so it's hypothetical. But I would say, for us at SAP, of course, we have a lot of HR use cases, right? And there are a lot of use cases, I would say, where, from an ethical perspective, they're not very critical. For example, generating a job posting. So there's of course, you want to make sure that that is discrimination free, and that the language is appropriate, that it's reflecting the values of the company, and so on and so forth. So I'm not saying that there are no ethics related requirements that we have, but in general, a job posting is not hurting anybody, is not depriving anybody from their human rights, or their including autonomy, including I don't know, other human rights. Autonomy, I would say, is the biggest in HR systems that you should be concerned about, next to discrimination. And I would say, in this respect, if we would have too strict regulations on these kind of use cases where human rights are actually not specifically under risk, then again we would see that introducing these processes in Europe would create much more burden than in other areas, and that means that European companies that are interested in these kind of processes would have extra burden compared to their competitors using these same systems with their same behavior in other countries, and that would be a concern to me, for example. But whether that's coming or not is based on what's the outcome of the AI Act and the discussions that are ongoing. So it's just hypothetical.
Yeah. So we have to stay curious what's going to happen. You mentioned efficiency is going up by using ChatGPT and other large language models, and I completely have to agree, because I, for this interview, actually also used it a lot. First of all, for the description, I also mentioned that when I wrote it. And I mean, I changed it a little bit, of course, but it gives you like a cool start, you know? You say like, describe this and that, and it gives you like a short paragraph. And then my husband gave me a really cool tip, because like he loves ChatGPT, he's like all over it. And he said, why don't you put in your biography and the biography of the other speaker, and then you put in your questions, and it can basically just give you an entire interview and kind of like predict what you're going to say. And it's completely different now that I'm talking to you, but it was actually interesting for me to like just read through it and kind of see what could like the answers be. I could change the questions a bit, you know, based on your actual like fake answers. I mean, yeah, not on the actual answers, the fake answers. So it was really interesting, and definitely helped me a lot with the interview. So what are other chances that you see, except for like efficiency? What are other chances we at SAP maybe also, or also as private people, what mainly SAP though, what are good use cases that you're excited about that are coming soon? I don't know. What are the chances for us as an enterprise?
I think there's so many use cases. I can talk about a bit what interests me the most, but I think we haven't captured half of what is possible with LLMs right now. Is every day there's something emergent, but I think all the classical things like translation is much easier. Categorization is much easier. Summarization, text creation, all of this text-based things, and that's the first things. Like for example, this job posting generation. You take backend information for what's the position, or what's the team doing, what's SAP doing, what is the location, what is the role that you want to advertise, what is the seniority you want to advertise. You just put this information in, and you get a complete and you put maybe the format in which you want to define the job posting. You put all of that in, and you can do that automatically. No user need to be involved in that, and you get a meaningful text that, of course, people can then adjust to their needs and to their feeling of how to present it best. But I think it's a huge start. And I mean, I'm coming from software engineering background, and one thing that I learned is that in if you have a digital system, deletion is much faster than creation. So if you have something that is creating automatically, deleting stuff is much easier for humans than creating new stuff. And in that way, you already see how this efficiency gains are working, right? So you can tailor, you can delete stuff that you don't need, but it's giving you a head start. But then I would say what is interesting me more are things that for some people come to as a surprise. So what you can do is you can generate code. You can that you can then automatically execute. You can generate API calls that you can automatically execute. You can generate plans of how to interact with a software system in order to fulfill a certain goal. And when you think about it, what people are referring to as agents is possible. So basically, a human defines the purpose, or defines an activity. You say, for example, I want to know what is the current status of a certain task, or is an invoice paid by a client of mine. And then you use a large language model to say, what would I have to do in order to get this information from the system? Here are all the APIs that I could invoke. This is the way I'm invoking it. Give me a potential plan of how to invoke the APIs, but one by one, in order to figure out, is this specific thing paid? And then probably the LLM gives you back, first you need to find the ID for the invoice, and then you find you check the status of the invoice with this call, and then you summarize in that way. And then what you can do is, next you tell the LLM, please execute the first call, check the result, then execute the next call, check the result, give me the final response. And all of that you can do automatically, right? And what it means is the LLM can understand how to interact with a software system, and the LLM is able to plan in certain boundary conditions. It's not 100% proof, but it's quite okay, I would say, in certain application areas to do planning. And then what it means is that you use the language generation capabilities of a large language model to generate a plan and to generate an execution. So it's not a text that a human sees. The human will in the end only see the output, but this text generation capability is good enough for us to automate interaction with a system, so the user doesn't have to go to the UI and click through the UI to figure it out, but to just give it to the LLM, and then the LLM, you could say, is having a monologue about how to deal with it and what to do next, and gives back the results magically to you. And this kind of applications, not many people at the moment are seeing that is possible, but that's actually what excites me most. That's I think that's not unrealistic that we will see this kind of applications, and then the way humans are interacting with systems will change. It will change from I'm defining what the task is, and after I defined what the task is, I have to go to the UI and I have to click through so I have to come up with a plan and I have to execute. But now, with this, if these agent-based systems are a reality, what I have to do is I have to define the task and I have to verify the response. But I don't have to figure out how to do it, and I don't have to actually execute on my mental plan. So I have to know much less about systems, and I have to do much less work in order to figure out the right result.
Yeah, not only about systems, also about like processes in general, right? Like, for example, I'm just thinking of like governments in Germany. Bureaucracy, it's a disaster. Like, we have to, for example, now get a new kindergarten like coupon. I don't know how you call it, but you need this like kind of piece of paper to put your kid in kindergarten. And the process of going through that is just insane, you know? So if we could have like an agent there helping us to just get this piece of paper a little bit easier than like fighting through this bureaucracy jungle in Germany, I would be very grateful. So that would be, yeah, so I'm looking forward to
also
agents.
When you think about it, what it means for us as a society, if you have, for example, a chatbot that helps you to fill out a form that a government agency is providing you, what it means that people who don't speak the language now have access to this.
Definitely.
What it means that people who don't understand what is meant by social security ID, that they can chat with something to get this information and maybe get an example and all this. I think the inclusion potential of it and the potential to provide access for people who didn't have access before to services and to products. I think this has a huge potential, in my opinion. Of course, we have to make sure that the systems are working reliably and that they're working according to some ethical standards. But I think, especially in Germany, but in other countries, I feel it's also happening. A lot of people are, because they are looking into AI ethics, they tend to overlook the great potential it has and the great, let's say, innovation power and also power to transform society for the better and to transform companies for the better, transform the way we're interacting with each other for the better, like allowing people to communicate freely without intermediary, without human translation service, what it means for us to interact with each other, what it means for us to interact with the systems around us in a better way. I think that's a great potential that I see with Gen AI.
That's true. And I want to talk about it for hours and hours on end now, but I want to get to one of the next questions, which we have to talk about before the time is up, because I really want to hear what you have to say. And it's about artificial general intelligence. And so not about LLMs. So no one should be scared now when I ask this question. It's about like what could possibly be in the future about general intelligence when you have a model that can actually act and actually has an awareness of some sort and is actually intelligent. So I read this book, Scary Smart, from Mo Gaudat, and he starts the book with a scenario from 2055, I think, sometime then, anyway, in the future. And he says, we'll meet at a campfire. And do we meet because we are scared and hiding from AI, or do we meet because we are living in a utopia? What do you think?
I think we can meet in a campfire right now, so it's always possible. But okay, I'm not avoiding your question. I can tell you, I was in the Enquete Commission, or I think translation study group for German Parliament, and we were asked, when will we see general artificial intelligence? And our answer by then was not in the next 50 years. And now, and then large language models came out, so ChatGPT came out, and for a moment I was like, what did we say? But then when you so I mean, I was like probably most, as I said, I was completely shocked and excited at the same time for what you can do, what kind of systems we have in front of it, and it's improving, right? So it was GPT-3, now we have GPT 3.5 and 4, so it's it's improving, of course. And you have a lot of other emerging models, like Mistral is now came out, Aleph Alpha here in Germany, the American models from Google, from Amazon, Cohere, Anthropic, and so on and so forth. So we see how much innovation is in the field. But I would say there's also interesting research suggesting what are the boundaries of that. And I would say, when it comes to planning, when it comes to common sense reasoning, when it comes to self-awareness, when it comes to producing factual knowledge, I would say even though it feels much bigger, in these areas we haven't made that much of a progress. So we can do a bit better planning, we can do a bit more common sense reasoning by mocking that there is common sense in what is generated, and to a certain degree it works. But because of the hallucination capabilities we talked about, you can never be sure, and you have to put so many guardrails that my assessment now, after looking into it, would still be not in the next 50 years, but I could be wrong. I mean, it's, for me, I think that there is no general artificial intelligence on the horizon. I personally don't see it. But if we would see it, then the question would be, why would we assume that it would want to extinct humankind? That is also, I mean, I'm not so pessimistic. So I think that, in my opinion, I think that, yeah, I would lean towards we're not doomed as a society, but but that's just a hypothetical, and I think that this question is something that we have some years in front of us to answer.
Yeah, I think he also, in the book, he says like there are many ways to avoid it, or like, but definitely what he says is like one important thing is to be a kind human being online, because he says like if we are like these cruel people like on Instagram, you know, everyone's just slapping each other with horrible comments, and if an AGI would go there and learn like about the human race and would read all these comments, it would be like, ooh. So we should be more like, I don't know, on LinkedIn, everyone is nice on LinkedIn, everyone is like, wow, good talk, wow, nice post, you know, like I think an AGI should learn from LinkedIn rather than no. I mean, obviously,
Yeah,
I don't have an
maybe.
opinion.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, what you're hinting at is that you have to take care of which data you're using for training, and I would agree. So if you use data from 4chan, then you get something different than when you use data from LinkedIn. That's true.
Yeah. So maybe you should end on that note. Just everyone be kind humans online. No hate comments. And yeah, maybe that's a good final sentence, because we are already, the time's up. It went so fast. I have so many more questions, but that has to wait for another time.
Yeah,
maybe we have
in
you
a
again
year.
next year. Yeah. So thank you so much for being here. There are not really any questions. I think we just overwhelmed everyone. But if you have any questions in the audience, make sure you can still comment everything under the event in the SAP community. Make sure you do the validation tutorial to earn points and sign up for the contest. The join button is very well hidden in the Devtoberfest group in the SAP community, but you should find it and press on it. Yeah, and then we see each other hopefully tomorrow in some sessions or next week for the last AI Thursday. So thanks for being here, Sebastian. It was really great talking to you. Thanks for everyone for listening. And yeah, see you next week, hopefully. And good luck with the contest.
Bye.
Now I just have to find my mouse. Where is it to end the stream? I lost it. There it is.